In 1985, in downtown Appleton, a public plaza was dedicated and named after Houdini. For many, that was the rejuvenation of the Houdini name and the connections that Houdini had to certainly Appleton as well as Wisconsin. Tonight we're going to be commemorating the 74th anniversary of Harry Houdini's death. And now I'd like to turn this evening's over to our seance director, Mr. Sidney Radner.
He had a pact with his wife. His wife, for 10 years, attempted to contact him on the anniversary of his death. Now, the reason why there are Houdini seances on Halloween is because he was a great showman and held off until Halloween to die. That's the day he died. That's not because it's Halloween. It has no relationship to Halloween. Beth's widow, at the 10th anniversary of his death, said that she had stopped and he had given up and wasn't going to make any more efforts to contact, and that was in 1936. After that, at different times, different magicians held attempts to reach Houdini, and I started in the 40s.
Now I'm at a point where I picked the place where we'll have the seance. Houdini lived in Milwaukee, and he lived at 3 or 4 different addresses in Milwaukee. Not early in his career hadn't started. When he was a youngster, he worked as a paper boy for the Milwaukee paper, for the Current. When he came back to Milwaukee, he did a stunt outside the Milwaukee Current building, getting out of a straitjacket that drew thousands of people. So the connection is good. If he were coming back, why not come back in a city that he had a liking for? He loved Wisconsin. And I gathered the people to come, and we have a group of real ardent Houdini buffs who love to come to it. 3 people are from New York, I'm from Massachusetts, 2 or 3 people from California, people who are very much Houdini related and have a connection. Dr. Morris Young has attended a number of the seances, and he wrote books on Houdini, and he's a representative of the Library of Congress, where he gave a collection of Houdini material there and so on.
If he is able to come back, there's so many things I'd like to ask him. In fact, the world would like to ask him that we could spend many hours together. Houdini was really a legend to me, and I wanted to meet this character. So I managed to get in to see him, and he just looked at me, and I said, "I'm interested in joining the Society of American Magicians." He said, "Well, you have to write New York City, and I have my secretary there, and he'll tell you how to go about it." I had to be 21 years old in order to join. I was only 17 years old at the time. And this was in September 1926, not too long before he was gone.
We held the seances. We've done it with all kinds of conditions. We've had strange things happen at some of them.
We had a seance at Niagara Falls at the then Houdini Magical Hall of Fame, which still doesn't exist anymore. And a pot of, I think, with some flowers in it was on a shelf near the seance. And when the medium at that time said, "Make your presence known, Harry," the pot fell down and a book fell down. And believe it or not, the book was written by Walter Gibson, and it was on Houdini, and it fell on the floor, and lo and behold, it was open to a page. It showed a picture of a seance poster, and the headline of the seance poster was something like, "Do the Dead Return?" I mean, that was there. There it fell on the floor. It was witnessed by the press and by people there. We had an occasion with a seance in a museum in Holyoke, Mass. We had a woman who, at the right time, so to speak, her beads fell off her neck and fell on the floor, broken, string of beads. So maybe Houdini did it, I don't know.
And we've continued through with what has now become the official Houdini Seance. We are seriously attempting to reach him. We are not doing this as a magic act or whatever. We have been fortunate to obtain a couple of people. We have Pamela Ashley, who is a recognized, certified medium, and she is going to take over the seance to see if she can make contact.
We try to have a professional. I started that a number of years ago with Henry Mueller. We started having mediums do it. You can have a seance without them, but we've had leading mediums, and we have two tonight coming these people have their individual fame as mediums. They seem not to have too much success with us, but they do have their own fame. But that's all right. If they don't, they don't.
Now, we also are trying to do something else as an experiment for the first time we've ever done it. And that is at one point, not too long into the seance, we intend to darken the light, and it's being filmed by infrared film, and that could, I know in the past there have been claims of it, where something can be seen that we can't see with the naked eye. Maybe we'll get results. So I'll turn it over to you, Pamela.
Thank you, Sid. I am a certified spiritualist medium with the National Spiritualist Association of Churches. I've been communicating with the spirit world since I was 3 years old, that I'm aware of, and came into spiritualism at the age of 17, currently vice president of the National Association. I said to Tom on the phone that I thought it was unique that I was invited to be here because Mr. Houdini spent a great deal of his life investigating spiritualism, the religion, and the spiritualist mediums. And I said to Tom, maybe this has come full circle, that you have a spiritualist medium here this evening. The Reverend Cozy Allen is facilitating this seance this evening. She's also communicated with the spirit world since she was a child. We want to please ask that no cameras be flashed during this time. It's harmful to ourselves and to the seance. We want you to understand that because somebody goes to the world of spirit, they do not become all-knowing immediately. Your personality transfers over just as you leave it here, and your doubt you take with you. And so sometimes when people come to us and want to reach a loved one or a friend, that's not always possible. Sometimes they don't want to come back and talk, and sometimes they don't know how. I did meditate for the last 2 days and checked with my spirit teachers, and one piece of information that I thought was impressive was that this seance is always conducted on the anniversary of Mr. Houdini's passing. And he said to me, my spirit teacher said, I wonder if the people on the earth plane recognize they're calling him back to a memory that was painful, and that they might want to conduct the seance at a different time, and that he might be more willing to come at a different time. And so I wanted to say that I have felt his presence through the day coming around me. I'm not sure what will happen. Now, Sid, you brought some items.
Yeah, I can explain what they are.
Did you want them on the table?
Yeah, I will put them on the table.
Houdini himself posed for and had a bust made. The bust over his grave was made from it. 3 plaster of Paris busts were made. 2 were destroyed by accident. One I ended up with that I got from Houdini, and that one's on display in Appleton. The bust on the grave got destroyed, was damaged by vandals on 2 different occasions. Now on the grave it's not there. They have one they bring in for a ceremony once a year and put it on the grave because they gave up, they closed the cemetery now on Halloween because they've had so much vandalism. Now keep in mind that Houdini never said that he is coming back. He debunked spiritualism, he debunked all of it, but he said this was his hedging. If anybody could come back, obviously I, Houdini, will come back.
He challenged spiritualism to bring the spirits back right before an audience. But meantime, he'd show how spiritualists do work, show how the foot can write something under the table, or how a table can be raised.
So in order to prevent fraud, he made sure that a pair of handcuffs that he gave his brother, by the way, which will be at the seance table here in Milwaukee this year, will be on the table, and other items of Houdini will be there, but if he opens those, believe me, I'll say he's here. This particular pair of handcuffs is one of 2 pairs of handcuffs in the world that have a Brahma lock. There was various feuds and fighting and claims and so forth between various locksmiths that they would make a pick-proof lock. And the Brahma lock was considered about as pick-proof as any lock could be. And people failed to open them. As a matter of fact, if a normal locksmith, a skilled locksmith, had this pair of handcuffs locked right now, put on the table, and said, here, you can take it to your shop and have all your tools, it would probably take them 7 or 8 hours to open the locks. So they're virtually pick-proof. It's a pick-proof lock. The interesting thing about this is, when you pick it or open it, you'll notice how many times I turn it. Now, each time is making it more secure, so to speak. Now, a person not having much chance to see all this has the problem of picking the lock and continually turning it, which is one of the big problems. How do you get it right, turn it, and so on? It's a very intriguing mechanism. And nobody has gotten out of these. Houdini might have gotten out of them at one time, but he had it in his collection.
Now, they're so difficult to open that I'd be satisfied if they moved on the table. There's another...
Me too, Sid.
There's another pair of handcuffs, and these are unique too.
This particular pair of handcuffs was invented by a Captain Bean of the Boston Police Department at the turn of the century. And he invented it and developed the key that normally goes with it is very small. It's about as big as this key here. And it's a flat key. It looks entirely different than this. And he said that nobody could get out of them, and he offered $500 to anybody who could get out of the handcuffs. And nobody could. And the interesting thing is, you could put the handcuffs on a person, hand them the key. In other words, you put them on, hand them the key, and he couldn't get the key in the keyhole, because if he brought them up to his mouth, he got the wrong side. So he couldn't put the key in the keyhole. And down this way, it's impossible to reach around and put the key in the keyhole. So you could say, here, I'll give you $500 if you can get out of the handcuffs. Here's the key, here's that. You can't get out. Well, Houdini did get out of them, and he wouldn't give him the money. The reason why he wouldn't give him the money is because Houdini refused to tell him how he got out.
The combination of these handcuffs that meant something to him and the reduced bust, which meant a lot to him, may help create a situation where he will come back in a Masonic lodge in which he was very much interested in. We're hoping the atmosphere is correct.
Very well, we'll open the seance with a prayer. Infinite Spirit, we recognize your presence here now. We ask that you shine your light of truth, your light of love and protection in and around this circle. We ask that that light be a portal to the world of spirit, to bring our loved ones and friends, our teachers and guides, to bring proof of the continuity of life here this evening. We request and accept all proof and manifestations that are given in the highest and greatest good for all concerned. Amen. I'm aware of Mr. Houdini's presence, and I'm going to ask him if he would attempt to do transfiguration, which means to show his face over mine. I'm hearing these words and I don't know what they mean, so I will just put them out. I'm being shown a wall, a short wall, stone, and at the bottom of the wall there's a very thin brick, and I'm seeing the spirit or the image of Mr. Houdini pointing at that bottom brick. And there is a date on that bottom brick that says 1826. And he's talking about his father. And he says when he was 11, his father was called away for a time. And he keeps pointing to this date, 1826. Now he says he's appeared to people before because he says 14 years ago one person sitting in this circle saw him. And I want to go where? I'm over here. Saw him, but you thought it was your imagination, but he appeared 14 years ago. I'm going to ask him if he will move those for you now. I'm hearing church bells, and he's saying to me that one time he lived in a place where he could hear the church bells every day at the same time, and he liked it. He wants to give us pieces of information that very few people know, so that the research will show. He said you had an experience one time with an object that moved. Yes.
I see it.
No, he's telling me you one time personally had an experience when an object that moved by itself, so to speak, and that you had curiosity about spirit manifestation and moving things, and it happened once, but then you talked yourself out of it. But you have the ability to make those things happen without magic. I believe I heard you say that Mr. Houdini had a brother. I know very little about the man, but I have the energy of a brother here with him. And the brother is saying to me that he went through a time in his life where he was terribly jealous of his brother. And they did not always get along. They had anger between them for a period in their life.
I was a protege of his brother. We were very, very close friends. Houdini did work with Houdini many times during his career. And when Houdini went to Europe in 1900, his success was so great that he wired his brother and said, "Come on over." And the object there was that Houdini, using that name, would compete with Houdini. Now, the public did not know they were brothers. The public, very few people knew it other than certain magicians and so forth. But they did that to keep out the competition, because there were different networks. When Houdini worked, Keith, for example, in the United States later, Houdini would work Pantages. They both went in business together with the motion picture company, so they were close throughout their lives.
I hope that you gentlemen know his history well enough to understand some of these things, because now I'm being told by the brother that there was a time before Mr. Houdini was Houdini, when he was a different name, where he brought some pain to his mother. And she went away. He went away. That caused her grief.
I think he may have run away twice, but at one point I think he did land up in Milwaukee. We had this scrapbook with a postcard he'd written to his folks at home. I think he must have been somewhere between 12 years old, something about that time.
In the early days at the mediums, I had these questions. For example, who was his lawyer, and who was this, and who was that, that Jocelyn sold him the walking through a brick wall. I mean, all these things are good clues. But a good researcher will come up with 90% of them. But they won't come up with some of the normal questions that you would know about somebody who you lost.
I'm feeling a child that did not come on the earth with Mr. Houdini, that he had a child that was not born. He wants to just leave you with this message. You all know that it takes a lot of time and dedication and practice to perfect your magic. It also takes a lot of time and dedication to perfect spirit communications and manifestations. If you would be willing to put a group together amongst yourselves who live in close proximity, to sit together once a week and call him present once a week, to build the energy. He says it will take 17 months if you dedicate once a week, 17 months for physical manifestation, where he will do the manifestation. But you must be dedicated. He apparently was a man who liked much admiration. However, now that he has been in spirit for so long, he recognizes that it is important to not spend your life admiring someone else. It's important that you spend your life admiring yourself and your own abilities and your own work. He needed I hear you. He needed the admiration of people because he didn't have it within himself. Interestingly enough, although he was a very well-known person, he didn't feel that inside of himself. And he says, if he could bring one message to the world, it would be that everybody would feel inside of themselves their own importance, so they didn't have to use magic and tricks to be important to other people. It's interesting because he spent a portion of his life being very philosophical. He hopes that those of you who are dedicated to your senses have been able to feel his presence here. And that through your dedication you will allow yourself to develop the ability to see manifestation. He thanks you for your dedication to your particular projects. He's stepping back.
Someone saw something 14 years ago, the light bulbs went off. I was in that cemetery exactly 14 years ago, 1986, this is the year 2000. At the time, my wife took a picture of this, of all the people standing around. All the picture was developed. There was a flame shooting out of the grave on the negative. Couldn't believe it. Absolutely couldn't believe it. We had it home. The day we took the picture, the flame got out of the grave.
About tonight, what impressed me most was the length of time that we were able to sit here and do nothing while waiting to hear Houdini or to see something of Houdini or possibly see him escape from the world he is supposed to be in at this moment. As an escape artist, he would get himself put under some kind of restraint and some type of curtain device put around him, and people would wait for a long, long time, much longer than we waited tonight. But I was impressed by the way we went through this example of what Houdini discovered was he could do to people, and perhaps he was making us wait tonight. Perhaps if we wait a little longer, maybe another year, 2 years, 10 years, who knows, we may be going through the same thing with other people and carrying on, call it the Houdini legend, or the Houdini wonder, whatever you want to call it. Some are possibly actual believers. There are also the non-skeptics who'd like to be believers.
If you ask a person on the street, almost anywhere in the English-speaking world, to name the famous magician, Houdini would probably be number one. Don't forget he had as much fame in England and in Germany as he had in the United States.
Because of the name Houdini, it's like going back to church. Regardless of anything relating to Houdini, they'll go to it.
He was, in my opinion, one of the two greatest showmen in American history, the other being P.T. Barnum. These are two of the most valuable handcuffs in the world, the third one being the mirror handcuffs, which are presently owned by David Copperfield, by the way. When various escape artists were claiming, I got out of it and I beat Houdini and I did things like that, Houdini would be in the audience and get up and say, you didn't do it, and they would challenge each other, and Houdini would take the handcuffs out. He had some others that he gimmicked and doctored and say, I defy you to get out of these, and the other escape artists would look at them and figure they could open them up. But when they put them on, they couldn't open them. What he had done is he had doctored the handcuffs, so the key that normally worked wouldn't even go in it. So when they tried to work a lockpick, they didn't know what to do. So he changed it to this lock here, which is entirely different than the other one. So it takes this lock to open it up. So none of them ever had been able to open the key after he doctored it, open the lock after he doctored it. And it's fairly well known now how he got out, but he used an extension on the pick, so he could get to the handcuff. Keep in mind, these are not adjustable like the modern handcuffs. In modern day handcuffs, they'd have an adjustable way to close it in on your wrist. That's before anybody invented the adjustable handcuff. That was invented by Peerless, and then handcuffs all used that technique. It was in the early days, people carried 3 or 4 pair of handcuffs if they had wanted to have small ones or big ones or whatever, which is unwieldy. This is uncomfortable. You start moving around, this hurts, but that's all it is to make it damn difficult for anybody in them, and no other reason. I can get out of them. I know how to get out of them without the key, but I'm not giving that information.
How long would it take you to get out of them?
Not too long, but I know the secret. That's the difference.
Now, when you say a secret, is that because they're jimmied handcuffs, or you know that there's a loophole in the design?
Let's put it this way. I know how to get out of them.
Oh, okay.
Okay. This, believe it or not, is a lockpick, and a very clever one. This was a standard lock of which there were all kinds of variations. If you multiply 6 by 6 by 6 by 6, you'll find out how many combinations you can get. But this here would make all kinds of combinations by changing that. I'll show you how you would do it. You unscrew this, and take this apart by pulling it out. And these sections, this comes completely apart, by the way. And you can take these and rearrange them. So you can rearrange any way you want. So you can duplicate any key, any other key that you saw that worked the lock that you were trying to open. Now, the logical question at this stage is, how do you know how to rearrange it? Why would you put this one here and not the other one and so on? Well, the technique there was to get an impression of the key. So when you saw the key that opened that particular lock, and you got an impression of it on wax or what have you, we have in the museum here some of the original wax that Houdini used. So he'd get an impression, and then either he or one of his assistants could rearrange this. Instead of having 12,000 keys, or whatever it would take the combination, you have one. It's one of the clever devices that Houdini invented. During his lifetime, things like this were never seen. He never tried to sell it to other escape artists or magicians or anything else. This was all part of his private collection, and that was kept in a separate trunk from everything else. This was Houdini gave and I always like this because, number one, it's small, it's easy to take, and sometimes I use it when I travel with a briefcase. I will never put it in a trunk. I will never check it. because to me it's too valuable. And people who collect locks and so forth are always enamored with it. But this opens up without a key. And the interesting thing is you take it and you can open it up. And yet you can give somebody the lock. I'm not saying it's impossible to open because I have had people figure it out. But when I demonstrate it, I always drive people crazy. Like, I take it like that, and you have to be very careful and open it up like that and close it. And of course, they're always doing that. That has nothing to do with it. But the way it really opens, what's clever is this is the markings, and that isn't. On this point, you pivot just here, and it opens. That's a heavy spring. And you just push it and open it. Because if you do that nonsense of doing that, you've got everybody. But you can try it. Push it right there.
It opens up very easily. When did you meet Houdini?
I met him in the 30s. I haunted Houdini so much that I think in self-defense he got to like me, and he liked my attitude and the fact that I wanted to do certain things. So I was lucky, because that was before other people started to collect and started to want it almost too late, because I collected it. I got most of it before anyone else had a chance to. And as a matter of fact, in 1942, in a letter Houdini wrote to me, he made that statement that I had the largest collection in the world. He said, I'm looking for more things if I can find them, but you've got it. And I acquired a lot of things of Houdini's after that fact. I was in Houdini's house in Brooklyn, which doesn't exist anymore. But I was there. I walked in the house one day, and on his desk was a jewelry box. And the jewelry box had a medal. And the medal was about, 3 inches or so. And it was made in the shape of a milk can. And it would have Theo Houdini and the chain, and on the milk can it said, for breaking house records in Tacoma, Washington, the date, and I believe it was 1908, but that's from memory without looking. And I said to him, gee, would you sell that? He said, no, I would never sell that because that's a personal thing that was given to me by Pantage's time and so on, because I drooled when I saw it. When I left, he gave it to me. About 2 or 3 hours later, he said, here, take it. He said, I know you want it, here, you take it. So I got it. That's now in Appleton, but it's not on display because we only display about 10% of what we have there. But we should rotate, and if we can get more funds in the museum so that we can do these things, we will display more and expand the museum. There's room to expand it. It just needs a certain amount of money. You know, Houdini invented a diving suit, and his idea at that time was to aid the sailors and others so that if something happened in a diving suit, they could escape from it. So he patented the diving suit. And I have the original patents, but of course patents you can get anyway. But I have the original ones owned by Houdini. And I was in the house one time, and the diving suit was sitting over there on the side, and Houdini said to me, do you want it? And I said, no. I was young and not too smart. So I said, no. I'm sorry now I didn't say yes, because I'm sure it was thrown away. Because all those things would have been very nice. Houdini actually worked with his brother in the early days when Houdini first started, just began to use the name Houdini. Actually, Houdini had another partner, and they used the name Houdini's. The other partner left very quickly. When Houdini got married, there was a situation where Bess was going to go on the show because they were making no money. They were broke at that time anyway. So there was not a case of here's a successful show, they'd all be part of it. So Houdini dropped out of the Houdinis, and Bess went in as one of the Houdinis. And they didn't have success for a few years after, so there was no room for the three of them. But Houdini did work with Houdini many times during his career. Incidentally, it's an interesting story. There was an occasion when Houdini and Houdini appeared in the same city, and Houdini was doing an outside straitjacket escape to publicize his show, and Houdini went to see the show and was part of the audience and passed out playbills to see Houdini, giving the impression that that was him up there. And Houdini said he didn't talk to me for a couple of weeks after that one. He was mad as could be that he did that, but he took credit for him being up there. They were always close friends till the end, so to speak, because Houdini appeared many times unknown to the public as an assistant of Houdini's, especially in certain days when he was doing challenges. And Houdini was a big character. He was much bigger than Houdini. And in the days of doing the handcuff escapes and the challenges and counter challenges with other escape artists, it was pretty tough. They would get tough characters on the stage, and Houdini and sometimes one of the other assistants, but Houdini was a tough, muscular guy. And they would go like this to one of the people who was giving them a hard time, get them to the edge of the stage. That's the last time you saw them on the stage. And they would kick them out, and that was it. That was a tough era. In order to do an escape act, you have to be young. You have to be not too smart. And because when you get smart, you know you should stop doing it. And Houdini stopped doing it, you know. Well, I was young and ready to take on the world in those days. I was lucky that the world wasn't too anxious to get me, so I got by. Of course, the water torture cell is the most valuable known trick that Houdini ever did. And unlike the Tony Curtis movie where he died attempting it, he not only did it, he did it for 13 years straight. Did it from 1913 through 1926. I think that's the most valuable single trick that Houdini ever had. And incidentally, something that people don't realize, he was planning to take that out of the show. And he was planning to replace it with something very, very interesting. And I own that very interesting item. And it was another box escape. It's entirely different. The water torture cell was creating physical problems for him. Don't forget, he was hanging upside down, he was holding his breath, and he was getting older. He was now 52. And he just plain had it. He was beginning to feel the pain. So he developed this trick a year or two before in England and had it made. And in a general impression, it's about the size of the water torture cell. But it comes in sections, but there's no water that gets put in it. But it's an intriguing device, and right now it's on display in Appleton, Wisconsin. But it was only 2 or 3 years ago that we figured out how to work it. He did it in 1925, I think, or it might have been 26, at the Hippodrome Theater in New York. And I have the records and the description and so forth. So he did do it. That was a test with the plans of putting it in the show regularly. People who collect posters and playbills and so forth don't realize that Houdini was a unique person. When posters such as you see right here that you collect, when a person, the normal magician, would get a stage show and he would do the same show all year, adapting, sometimes taking something out because he came in a theater that he couldn't use something. This is done today. Copperfield sometimes changes the show to adapt the theater he's in, but it's the same show for the season. So, but Houdini's show, when he was doing the challenges, he could work the Hippodrome Theater in New York for 3 weeks straight, and for 3 weeks straight, every show was different because he had a different challenge. So when you start collecting playbills, they're indefinite. So, and that was done one night of a 3-week session, and something else was done another night, something else was done the third night, and so on. He kept people coming back, but that was part of his theory anyway. And early in his career, when he first started to do the straitjacket escape, I think his brother did this first. They did it undercover when they first started to do it. I think Houdini came up with the idea of doing it in full view of the audience. And then what they would do is they started to play this to the hilt. They would do a straitjacket escape on a Monday or Tuesday night, and they would get somebody to write a letter that was planted to complain that they did it, and they didn't see him do it, couldn't do it in full view of the audience, and so on. And he would respond with publicity that on Thursday or Friday night, He would do it in full view of the audience. He'd get some of the same people that saw it Tuesday night coming back on the other night, which was smart promotion. But that's what he was. Houdini was a promoter. There had been some famous stories of how he got out of a river and the ice had gotten so thick that he had to find his way up and so forth. But that was fiction. I mean, some of these great stories were created, but he did it. Why anybody has to create anything about what Houdini did is beyond me, because his real life, his true happenings are so fascinating, you don't have to create anything.
Everything under the sun you could locate, I collected Houdini. I was very impressed by Houdini's writings, which hadn't been brought to the general public too much. I thought I'd bring these together and let the people know that Houdini was more than just a magician, that he'd done a lot of writing. I had a lot of memorabilia, the pictures and whatnot to go into it. After that, the next book we did was Walter Gibson and I said, since I saw the show, since you know so much about Houdini, and people want to know how he did all these big tricks on his show, let's pick out some of the biggest ones, and we'll make a story how they developed in this manner. So we put together a book which was called Houdini's Fabulous Magic. So we turned over some 20,000 printed items to the Library of Congress. They didn't want any of the apparatus. No one wanted it. Smithsonian didn't want it. We finally got the Ring Museum in Florida to take over his apparatus. And I've been adding things to our collection at the Library of Congress since then. Houdini material, however, seemed over the years to become very more important. I met Mrs. Hardin, Elsie Hardin, and she had some stuff in the cellar and home after Hardin had died, and she told us, she's moving out, we want to clean up this cellar and whatnot. So we had permission to go down the cellar, clean up everything that Sidney Radner had left, or that Hardin. And Sid left some nice things there. One thing was a trunk of a special trunk called trunk number 8, which had all the secrets theoretically, all the material that Houdini needed most. Houdini had some important assistants working with him. They kept things in this trunk which they could utilize for helping him in his various escapes and apparatus and so on. There was a pair of handcuffs I guess Sid had missed this one. A pair of handcuffs hammered onto a pillar in the cellar. And I said to Mrs. Hardin, what's this? She said, oh, he thought a lot of this handcuff. She said, it belonged to Houdini, and he just kept it as a good luck amulet. He also had a horseshoe nailed under there. He said, but he kept it up there like a good luck charm. So, do you mind if we pull this handcuff off? We took a hammer and pulled the handcuff off. I wrote a story on that, which I call this the last handcuff. This is the last handcuff that I think could be salvaged from all the Houdini equipment. Now, I still have that handcuff because my son wants to retain it as a treasure.
Well, I'll ask you a question. If he were around today, what would he be more famous for, or most famous for?
I would probably say he would be into large escapes.
No. I know what he would be most famous for. He'd be the oldest person alive. I can't resist that one.
We just went right there.
Tom has discussed.
Have you heard this one before, Tom?
I heard it before, and he suckered me